Hey, it's Mike from Cornfield Customs, and I am here today to show you guys some power hammer basic applications. So let's get to it. The part I'm going to show you guys how to make today is one half of this guard. So we have our flat surface, our shrunk over radius, and if you were making a motorcycle guard, you could do a left and a right, seam it down the middle, weld it together, and you have a finished part. So to create these guards, we're going to use two different types of tooling. The majority of our shape work is going to be done with thumbnail dies that will create a tuck and close the tuck as you pull the metal out. That will give us our shrink. And then from there, we will switch over to radial planishing or radial hammer tooling. It will have a flat upper die and a radius lower tool that matches the desired radius. And we're going to focus on a 2-inch radius tool in the corner of our guard and a 36 on the top and a 36 on the side because they're extremely low crown. What I've done is I've laid out a basic guard template. So I've laid out our first light line, which is where the light is going to start bending. So we have to come in and shrink to that point to get the light to start to bend. So I've laid out our first set, our second set, and our third set of shrinks. That way we get a nice clean radius throughout. I've went ahead and set up the power hammer with our thumbnail dies. So we are at 3/4 stroke. So it's going to hit not its full capability, but 3/4 of its force. And I run about a 6 mil gap in between the tooling. And that allows the springs to kind of whip that tooling and get you a nice clean shrink and get everything closed off. So I'm going to put on some gloves, some hearing protection, and we will get to shrinking. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in and shrink to our light line that I've laid out on each shrink mark. Then we will come back and step 2/3 of that in between each line. And then I'll come back for a third set and do on and in between each line. That is going to allow us to gather that material and tighten that edge. And that'll be our first full set of shrinks. And then I'll come back and move our light line to the second line, repeat that 3-step process, then to the end. So we're going to stand directly in front of the machine, and we're not going to pay attention to the tooling. We're going to watch through the tooling and watch what the material is doing as we shrink. So the process is we're going to put the material in, get it touching the thumb. You don't want to run the hammer before the metal is inserted or else you'll coin or stretch the ends out, which is going to kind of be counterintuitive to the shrinking process. So we'll put that in till it touches the thumb, get the machine running, push in, and we're going to watch for, it's like a kidney bean shaped part to come up in the material, and that is going to be what lines up with our light line, not the front of the die and not the end of the thumb. You have to watch for that kidney bean shape and get it to touch your light line. We'll pull down a couple degrees and we'll come straight out at a slow feed rate. That way we can ensure that we're closing our tuck off. And then once we get to the edge, we're going to feather off the pedal again so we don't overstretch or coin that end. So we'll come in, the material is up against the thumb, foot is on the pedal, and I'm watching through the tooling, not watching what the tooling itself is doing, just how the metal is reacting. And here you can see there's that kidney bean shape that I was talking about, and we need it to come up and touch that light line. That's going to ensure we're going to get a very nice, clean, smooth, defined light line. So we'll put the material back in and close it on the way out. That is our first full shrink. So now I'll come in and repeat that process on all of our other laid out shrink marks. So this is our first full set of shrinks all the way across. And like I mentioned, now we need to come back and split that into 2/3 depth in between each one of those shrinks, and then we'll tighten up the edge again. And you can see that our edge is loose, and that's why we get this wavy loose edge. We just need to shrink here a little bit more. So I'll repeat that process, like I said, 2/3 of the way in, get everything to start tightening out, and then we can adjust the form and come back and do our second set of shrinks. That is our first full set of shrinks, and we'll move back to our second light line and continue to pull that radius over. You might notice in the video that I'm using my body and my forearms to help support the panel. The more shape and the more shrink we put into the panel, it's going to get a little bit harder to hold on to. So any force or support you can give the panel is really going to benefit so it doesn't start jumping around. So I tend to hold it up against my chest or even use my forearm to preload that a little bit just to give it some tension in the panel and not be bouncing all over the place. So we'll continue back, tighten up the edge, and repeat on our third light line. So I was coming in and shrinking on our line here, straight on our shrink mark, and if I saw the edge getting loose, kind of waffly, I would come in and shrink that edge to tighten that up. And that'll come from experience, getting used to seeing the edge extremely loose, and you know it's gonna have to be tight because it has to have this nice tight radius. So that's why you may have seen me jumping in and doing multiple passes there at the edge instead of one across, just knowing that I needed to tighten that edge up a little bit more. So we've done our full 3-step shrinking process, and you might look at this and say that doesn't look like any guard I've seen because it's bowed this way and that way. But just us holding it and supporting it in the shrinking process has affected the form, which is not a big deal because form is just bending. So if we need to adjust the form, all I need to do is push down and out, and we can adjust the form and bring that right in to look more like the guard you're used to seeing. So don't be afraid to manipulate the form to make it easier to shape. We just added the form. If we need to take it back out, we can take the form back out. If we need to put it back in, we can repeat that process and continue to adjust the form as need be, and it doesn't affect anything other than form or bending. We're not going to destroy or distort the panel. So from this point, it looks kind of rough, bumpy, and we will change out the tooling from thumbnail dies to radial stretch dies, and we will clean all of the shrink marks up, blend them out into one another, so raise the lows, push the highs down, and get a nice smooth surface. So we're changing out our tooling from thumbnail dies, and that's because the thumbnail die is meant just for shrinking, and to blend or smooth that surface out, we need to radial stretch, so we have to switch out to our radial tooling. The radial tooling we're going to be using is a 2-inch lower tool and a flat upper tool for the radius, and then we'll probably use a 36 flat on the sides and the top because those don't have very much shape. It's mainly defined in that 2-inch radius section, so we really need to clean it up. So we have the flat top upper die, 2-inch radius lower die. We have a little bit higher of a gap due to the tooling change, so I'll lower that down again to about 4 to 6 mil of tooling gap to get that whipping action. As mentioned, now that the tooling is changed, we are going to focus in between these two lines, washing across, blending out that 2-inch radius. So that's what the 2-inch radius tool is for. So we'll get all of these lumps and bumps out, blend it relatively smooth, and get this thing put into shape. Compared to when we were doing our shrinking mark, I didn't hold this into my chest as much because I didn't need the support. We were working here in this tighter radius with a tighter radius tool, so I could just use my hands to manipulate where the metal was going. Also with that, just like when shrinking, I wasn't looking at the tooling, I was watching the metal, raising up any lows, hammering down any highs, and getting the surface to come around and be more uniform. I also did not change any speed settings on the machine. I controlled that by feathering my foot on the foot pedal. So you don't need to change all of your settings every time you make a panel. You just have to get used to using your foot to control the RPM, which is going to help aid in how hard and how fast everything's going to work. With that in mind, I highly recommend for you guys that are new to power hammers, start with the RPM a lot slower. It's going to keep things from getting out of control, the panel getting overworked, and just getting into a mess. So start slow, increase the speed as your skill set and your comfort increases with the machine. Here we have done the rough blending with our 2-inch radius. It still has some tooling marks, but that's okay because we're not doing our finish work on the hammer. We're just using the hammer to use its force and blend all of that out so we don't have to air planish through all of this rough material. So we're going to get it close to being uniform, and then we'll jump over to the air planisher. But before we get into that, I'm going to change this 2-inch radius tool out for a 36. We'll clean this up, and then we can jump over to air planishing to get things dialed in. When it comes to die selection, you want to use the lowest crown, lower tool anvil that you can. So could we put shape in on a low crown using a 2-inch radius die? Absolutely. But the problem is our contact patch is going to be so small on a 2-inch radius die, it's going to put a lot of dents and overwork the panel. So on our panel, the top surface and the face is extremely low crown, so we're going to use an extremely low crown tool, which in our case happens to be a 36-inch radius. So we're going to do that just to not overwork, overstretch, and put too much shape in a panel that shouldn't have a lot of shape to begin with. We have our 36 lower in the bottom, our flat top tool in the top, and again, we're going to adjust our tool gap to about 4 to 6 mil. That way it gets that whipping action I keep talking about. And don't be afraid to always check your adjustments, stroke, tool gap, always make sure those settings are correct because that's what's so important. If you walk away from a machine and somebody else is on it, they can change the settings, or each tool could be slightly different based on its radius. So you really want to get in the habit of checking your tooling clearance and your stroke so you don't make mistakes when shaping your panels. We did our 2-inch radius here, so now we are going to focus right up against this blue line and this top surface. Get all of the waves, lumps, and bumps out. Now our rough blending with our 36-inch radius is done. This is nice and flat. This is nice and smooth. Our 2 inches defined, so we can jump over to the air planisher and use the same corresponding radius tooling to get all of this blended out nice and smooth and ready to weld together. All right, so we're at our air planisher and we have our 2-inch radius tool. We will put that in. I like to set things a little bit tighter than most people. You'll see a lot of guys, they'll put the head up like that and you have this much play. I like to bring that down and just a little bit of wiggle. That allows the hammer to be constantly hammering down, and you can adjust the force based on your air pressure. So we have our 2-inch die, our tooling gap set. We'll take our panel, and just like on the power hammer, we're going to focus that 2-inch radius tool in between these 2 points and really clean this surface up. Planishing is a very slow, meticulous process. You're not going to have this panel ready to be welded together in 5 minutes. Be prepared to spend some time. And just like on the power hammer, I'm not looking at the tooling. I'm looking at the material. I'm looking at how the finish is coming up, all the radii blending into one another. Look at it as we're manipulating the light, not our material. So always be watching what the metal is doing, how the surface is coming up, how smooth the radius is getting, and how the light is bending around your panel. That is critical. If the metal looks good, but our light moves all over the place, then our part is not actually smooth and straight. That's what we're trying to do on the air planisher, is dial that back, get everything defined and perfect. So don't be afraid to spend a fair amount of time on the air planisher. The power hammer is quick, dirty, shape. We're gonna get everything close, maybe 60, 70%. The rest of the work is going to be done on the air planisher and getting that dialed in with a little bit of hand work at the end. So just like when we were running the power hammer, I'm not looking at the dies and I'm not looking at the metal itself. I'm watching the light and I'm bringing up low spots, pushing down high spots, getting everything smoothed out. And you'll see me adjust the air pressure. If I find more of a stubborn spot, I'll adjust the air pressure up so it hits a little bit harder. Then once it comes up into place, I'll lower the air pressure back down. We're not super concerned with stretching at this point. We're just trying to smooth and even the surface. You can also see that I'm not moving around a whole lot. I'm standing stationary in front of the machine and my arms are doing the work. If you're moving around, the panel can also move around and create damage from the edge of your tooling. So it's better to stay stationary and just move the panel and your arms. So while planishing, I moved multiple different directions. I went left to right, then in and out, and then kind of at a 45. This is just like shading with a pencil. The more directions you go, the smoother it's gonna get and you're gonna work out any hard edges you create. With it being a radial shaping process, you don't have to worry about going a certain direction. All the force spreads outward from the contact patch in all directions, but I like to do it in multiple directions. Again, it's just like shading with a pencil. The more directions you go, the better your overlap and your coverage is gonna be. I've got the 2-inch radius here, pretty cleaned up. So I'm gonna switch the tooling out to 36 and we'll crisp this line up and kind of fade that over to here. And then I'll show you how things are looking. So we'll take our 2-inch radius out and we'll put our 36-inch radius in, and setting up that little bit of a tighter tool gap than normal. On this edge, since I want it to have a somewhat crisp corner, I'm just using our 36 to push up right against that line we laid for our first set of shrinks. So that gives us that nice low crown or flat area with a crisp break into the 2-inch radius. So all I'm doing is using the edge of the upper tool to follow right against that line and work any distortion back up into the radius. So with that tidied up, we'll do the outside and we'll see how it looks. Just like when we were crisping this line up, I'm being cautious to not carry our 36-inch radius tool into our 2-inch radius zone. I don't want that to be crisp like I do on the face, but if we keep pushing over into this radius, the lower die will create a groove. So I'm just making sure to stay away from where that starts blending into the 2-inch radius and focusing on not causing lines. We're trying to smooth the panel, not create more work for ourselves. You can see the difference from the side I worked on and started cleaning up to the side we haven't. And this is just the start of the planishing process. We're not anywhere near done. So from here, I would wipe everything down with isopropyl alcohol or a glass cleaner to get all the oil off the panel, and then continue to planish, bring that surface up to a reflection, and then we can just continue planishing and getting all the imperfections out. The cleanliness of your panel and your tooling and the polish on your tooling is gonna be what brings that shine up. It's gonna burnish the panel as you work it, and it's gonna make it way easier to see any imperfections in the light. Just like I said earlier in this video, we're bending light, so we need to easily be able to see the reflection and all the imperfections that we need to correct. Just to save time, here's one from the classes we did over the past couple weeks, and you can see how the finish has come way up. You can see that nice, crisp, defined edge, and the reflection is really nice. So this has a fair amount of time in it, and you can see the difference between a more refined panel and an unrefined panel. So don't rush through the planishing process. It's tedious, it's time consuming, but it makes all the difference. You can also do low crown shaped panels like roof inserts, hoods, door skins, trunk lids, all of those things on the hammer as well. The difference is before we were doing shrinking, and now we're gonna be doing radial stretch. So we have a flat upper tool, we have a 24-inch radius lower, and we're going to come in and stretch the center of this panel up, getting us our low crown. This panel I've already lubricated with a mixture of ATF, automatic transmission fluid, and mineral spirits. That allows it to slide through the machine. You can also use WD-40 or any other aerosol style lubricant of your choice. You just need something to reduce the friction and allow it to slide through the tooling as the machine works. One of the other things you can do, if it helps you keep track of where you are, personally, I like to do this on the larger panels, is add a grid pattern. So it allows me to keep track of where I'm working, where I've been, and I always start in the middle and work my way out. So I'll come into the center grid, go all the way across, out to the next one, and up. Machine settings on the power hammer for radial stretch is very similar to when we were shrinking, and it will be when we're linear stretching as well. So we want about the same 4 to 6 millimeter tooling gap, everything lined up, and the machine is going to be set stroke-wise depending on how hard you need to hit to achieve the shape with the tooling you have. Since we have a 24-inch radius lower in it, I want it to hit a little bit harder, so we're running 3/4 of the stroke on our side adjustment, so the hammer's going to hit pretty hard. That way it'll build that shape a lot faster. If we were running a tighter radius radial tool, like a 4 and 8, something like that will put a lot of dents in the panel, so you want to turn that stroke down so it's not hitting quite as hard. So we will start in the center of our panel and work outward so we get our stretch. We'll keep away from the edge a little bit, that way it locks our shape in, but we're going to need more stretch in the middle, less towards the edge, so that's why I like to start in the middle, build our shape, and work out. It might be tough to see in the camera, but there is shape in this panel. You can see it by popping back and forth and the noise that it makes. This is a low crown panel, usually around a 48, 36, or 24-inch radius. So you're not going to get drastic shape change. That's why it's called a low crown. So we would have to check this with radius gauges, sweeps, or splines to figure out how much more we need to accomplish the shape we need for, say, a roof. So we would compare it to the car and bring this up to match. So that is radial stretch on the power hammer. We're going to do a quick linear stretch panel to demonstrate how linear works. I went ahead and put our linear tooling in the bottom with a flat top upper die. So what linear means is as that upper die comes down and makes contact with the lower die, which is shaped in a line, the material is going to take the path of least resistance. So it's going to move out left and right of that center line. So as it comes out, it's going to spread, which is going to make the sheet metal either curl up or down and go an opposite direction on the other plane. So when checking the tooling height at the bottom of its stroke, you always want to ensure that the machine is sitting at the bottom of its stroke. So if you reach over to this wheel, which manually spins the hammer over, you can see it moves the upper tooling. So we're just making sure it is set at the bottom of our stroke, and we can check our tooling gap, which again is about 4 to 6 millimeter. That way it gets that whipping action of the upper ram. Linear stretch is just going to be one of the hardest things you guys come across, and don't get discouraged. Just take your time, ease into it, and everything should work out fine. So our machine settings with this one, again, is 4 to 6 millimeter tool gap. We're still running about 3/4 stroke. Speed is going to be dependent on how you feel, and that is for shrinking, radial stretch, and linear stretch. Start out slower with the machine running slower until you get more confident, then you can run faster. You just want to make sure you're not running such a fast RPM that you're floating the springs in the hammer, because then you really won't be doing any effective work. So you're going to find that sweet spot of how fast you can work and how fast the machine can work and be right at the top of your efficiency level. So we're just going to use another one of these half guard blanks, and I will come in and linear stretch at the edge, get it loose, and I'll show you guys what it looks like loose, and then we'll move inboard and tighten that out, and you'll see the panel start to come up and around. You can see that the edge is loose or wavy, so I've added extra material by thinning it out with linear stretch, and that created a loose edge. Now to tighten that up, like I said, we'll just move inboard, stretch in here, and that will come out and tighten that looseness up, and we can continue to work in as far as need be. So we've stretched inboard, which has tightened up our edge, and the material is starting to go 2 different directions. Hopefully you guys can see it. The panel is falling this way, and it's starting to fan up this way. So I'll get a little bit more aggressive with it at the edge to show the dramatic effect of a linear stretch, creating a reverse curve. So I'm holding the panel a little different just to support it, and I'm not pushing up, I'm gently guiding it, almost essentially telling it which direction I want it to go. We're not having it in the machine wrenching up on it because that'll create tooling marks off the front edge. But as that panel gets loose, we can say, I want you to fall that way, and it'll allow the panel to fall this way. If we were to want it to fall the other direction, we would just gently guide it down and it would go the opposite. But depending on which way this radius comes off is going to dictate which way this radius falls. So you have to keep that in mind. And if it gets to the point you're shaping it and the radius is too tall and you're blind, you can't see what's happening, then you can flip the panel over and work it backwards, depending on how you need the panel arranged. So I'll get back to it, stretch this edge, and show you an aggressive radius. So you can see the shape is developing more. It's coming down and fanning up, while this way the panel is falling left and right, and you can see that reverse coming up. The more aggressive the reverse you need, in a certain spot, we will come up to what is our dedicated light line, which will be laid out on our pattern. Here I've just chosen a line that I'm working to. If you want that to be almost a 90, you will stretch up to that point and it'll turn the edge. If you want it to be more of a subtle radius, you'll start there and continue to fade off of the edge, stopping shy of that line every time to get that nice gradual fade. You might notice as well, my body position, I'm standing square in front of the machine and I'm twisting at my hips. That way I get a nice, smooth rotation. We're not doing this where we could get kind of jumpy moves. We want to be smooth. Smooth and efficient on the hammer is going to make smooth and efficient parts. So nice, smooth twisting at the hips, controlling with your hands, and watching what the material's doing. So I find it way easier to always be standing right in front of the machine, squared off, unless it's a big complicated panel, and then you kind of have to make the rules up as you go on where you stand and how you're positioning yourself. But always a good habit to be directly in front of the machine where you can see what is happening to your panel while the machine works. A lot of people ask why the dies are so high in the machine compared to the user. And the biggest thing is because you need to be able to see through the tooling to see what's happening to your panel as you work it. But there are certain instances where the machine can be too tall for the panel you're working. So say we're doing a very large roof insert or a hood. I can't support that all the way out and up. So what we would do is we would make a platform that we can stand up on. I can't really look through the tooling. Most of the time that's going to be with large radial stretch parts, but it gets you up a little bit higher to take the tension off of your shoulders. Because if we have, say, a 4 foot by 4 foot square panel, and I'm holding it out like this and doing a twist, that's going to be a lot better of a position than if I was lower to the ground, having to hold that up closer to chin height. So don't be afraid to make yourself a platform that you can stand on if you're a little on the shorter side or the panel dictates that it's going to need to be raised up to make it easier on your body. So anything you can do to make shaping easier, just keep in mind when shrinking and linear stretching, you want to be able to see through the dies comfortably. You don't want to have to be bending down to look through when you can easily remove a platform. Here are our 3 finished power hammer demo pieces. So we have our shrinking, and we did a little bit of radial stretch here to blend all of that out. And then we went to the planishing hammer, our low crown panel that was all radial stretch, and our linear stretch reverse curve panel. So these are the most common things you will be doing on the power hammer, creating shape. So keep in mind when you're talking about shape, you're changing the material thickness and the surface area. Shrinking, the material is going to be getting thicker and you're going to be losing some surface area, while stretch, radial and linear, you're going to be thinning and adding surface area. And that's what's going to create your shape. Form is just going to be bending, where we talked about taking these panels in and out of form to planish more. So don't focus so much on the bending just yet. focus on the shaping, shrinking, stretching, thickening, and thinning. Those are going to be the biggest things that you're going to be doing on the hammer, and that's how we create any shape in the automotive industry, with shrinking and stretching. So keep in mind, again, while running the hammer, you want to stay square in front of the machine. You want to look through the tooling, not at the tooling, to see what is happening to the metal when you shrink and linear stretch. Radial, it's not as critical to watch through the tooling, so don't be afraid to get on a platform to raise yourself up on some of those larger panels to keep the soreness out of your shoulders. Like I said, on really big panels, that's going to be kind of a necessity. And take your time, be patient, really don't get in a hurry. I know that goes in with being patient, but it's just that important to say again. This is not a fast process, especially while learning. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Those are going to be the best teachers out there. So get out there, shape some metal, make some mistakes, and get to learning.